Steve Bellinger, science fiction author. Fascinating story. He released his first book at age 65. At 12 years old, his mother brought him Isaac Asimov, iRobot, changed his life. And he took 3 years to write his first novel, The Chronic Car, Urban Adventure in Time. It is a time, space, science fiction, time travel book. It's hard to kind of pin it that way, but there's so much more to it. We have a great discussion on actually what is science fiction. Is Star Wars science fiction versus Star Trek? He's very, very passionate about that subject, but he's now written 4 books, all that have the kind of chronic car within them. Edge of Perception, Apocalypse, and the last one, Time Awaits for No One, The Chronic Car Chronicles. He is in process of writing another one now. Fascinating discussion. Like I said, it took 3 years to write the first one. He wanted to get all the science correct. And I asked him about storyboarding and how much, preparation he had there. His answer is fascinating. He kind of has a conclusion and he just brings it back. So many of these authors I speak to, it's so wonderful. They're not quite sure what's going to happen. And the characters just kind of take over as they're typing. It's just wonderful. I've never experienced that before. That must be an amazing feeling. But a great conversation with Steve Bellinger. You're going to love it. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. I want to make sure, Steve Bellinger, thank you so much for your time today. I'm very excited to talk to you. Is time travel possible?
Honestly, no, I don't think it is.
Ever.
Well, there is a theory of traveling through time by nature of traveling faster than the speed of light and then, and all of that stuff. But that's time travel in one direction. In fact, it's not really time travel, it's time dilation. Getting into a machine and going back and forth in time, like driving around in a Buick, I don't believe that's possible. If it were, we'd already be in trouble.
We absolutely would be, yes. But this is the theme of your first and last novel, fiction.
Well, my first novel, well, again, it is science fiction.
Yes.
I mean, do you believe everything you see on Star Trek? It's all for entertainment purposes, but there's a trick that I learned from Isaac Asimov, and that is to start a story with some real science and then morph that into the science fiction. Makes it a lot more believable. And I've had people just like you ask me if the Chronic Car is real, if these things can really happen, which I guess is the ultimate compliment.
Certainly is. You make it so lifelike. So what is science fiction?
Good question, because I get into many discussions over that.
Yeah.
In my opinion, science fiction is a story where the science, whether real or imaginary, are so central to the story that without it, it would fall apart. Now, by that definition, Star Wars is not science fiction. The technology, the lightsabers and the spaceships, they're just settings. It's basically a story of rebels fighting an evil empire. It's almost like King Arthur. You could tell the same story with metal swords and wooden ships. But in a story like maybe some of the Star Trek movies, without the Enterprise, without some of the science, quote unquote, you wouldn't have a story. In the case of the Chronicar, without the science of time travel, there would be no story.
See, I always thought anything from the past is fantasy. Anything in the future is science fiction. So Star Wars is in a galaxy a long, long time ago. So it's in the past. So it's more fantasy. And Star Trek, some of the other space ones are more science fiction. Thoughts?
Well, again, science fiction, I think, depends on the content whenever it happens. I mean,
Mm,
Westerns took place in the past. That's not science fiction, except
mm,
for cowboys versus aliens, I guess. But,
mm.
I'm really old fashioned sci fi. I
Yeah.
uh, cut my teeth on Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and those guys. In fact, one of the compliments I get with my novels is that they do harken back to the classic days of science fiction. And again, it's science. It's whether the science is real or not, obviously, but it's the science that makes the story. It's the unusual things that happen that makes the story. I also tell my fans, if you will, that what makes my stories different is that there are no space aliens. There's no intergalactic battles. It's just ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, which makes it a lot more believable.
Like
So
a movie
science
like,
fiction, well,
sorry,
yeah, so science fiction doesn't have to be outer space, is my point.
right. Like Minority Report, for example, where it's in the
Mhm.
future and they're trying to stop things from happening. There's some time travel involved. You could still consider that science fiction.
Oh yeah, it's science fiction. But what's interesting is that take for example the original time travel story of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. There are a lot of things that sort of glossed over. I mean, he goes back and forth in time, and there are no consequences. Let me run this by
Mm.
you. When you travel through time, are you also traveling through space? Because if I were to get into a time machine right now and go back exactly 1 hour, I'd be a half a million miles out in space because that's where the
Mm.
Earth was an hour ago.
Was
So
right.
that's one of the things that we deal with the Chronicar. In fact, a friend of mine, Sue Burke, you may have heard of her. She's written some great science fiction. She says that my stories actually solve the time travel paradox because it takes all of these things into consideration.
That's why I opened up with that question. Yeah, 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 very, very true. Now you took like 2 or 3 years to write the Chronicar, the first book, correct?
Right. Most of it was historical research because it takes place during a real time and involves a real event. And, some of it was the science. I mean, I did a little research on Isaac Newton and how things work in the universe to try to make sense out of how time travel could work if it were possible.
Hmm.
So just to make it realistic.
And with always of the intention of writing this book.
Yes, yes. And that was my dream. I've been playing around with this idea for years, and I finally sat down and decided to do the research and write it. In fact, I put the thing on the shelf for a while, and then my wife picked it up, read it, and threatened to
Right.
divorce me if I didn't submit it to a publisher.
And
Talk
did
about
you?
motivation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no greater, perhaps. Did you storyboard? How much of the story did you have?
Oh well, I'm a bad example for writers because I write by the seat of my
Really?
pants. I make some notes, I put it together in my head, and then I sit down and just start writing. Of course,
Wow.
you go back and you edit and you edit. But I guess I can see it in my mind almost like a movie and just put it together that way. The only organizing I did was I had a spreadsheet with timelines because with time travel you got to keep track of where you are and
Mm,
whatever. So
mm.
this guy was born at this date, this guy born at that date, what age would they be at different times? But other than that, it was just the story wrote itself.
So with the characters, you had no idea what was going to happen to them. You
I
just
kind of
started
had
writing.
an idea. Well, I had a general idea of what the effect of time travel would be in the story.
Hmm.
The ending, which I'm told is a big surprise ending. I've
It
been told
is.
that,
It
yeah,
is.
okay. And a friend of mine says he was in traction for a week after reading that. But the thing about it, it is the only logical way to end the story. So it
Yeah.
surprises me that readers are surprised by it. Um, Again, the story wrote itself. One of the secrets of all of my novels is that the main character is always based on me. Tony Carpenter went to IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology. So did I. And in fact, a little sideline here, my alma mater honored me by putting a copy of this book in the university's archives. Very, very proud of that. But what I did was when something would happen, I would ask myself, what would I have done at that time in my life? And pretty much that's how the story works out.
I heard you say, though, that you did have an almost ending in mind and you kind of worked backwards.
Yes, yes, I do that a lot. You know, you get an ending and it's a great ending. So how do you get there? You know, because to me, it's the ending. The last thing you see is the thing you're left with. And that's the one thing that is always in the reader's mind. Oh my God, that's what happened in the end. And of course, now they're dying to read the next book.
You mentioned once that an editor tells you to make a change and you didn't like it and you said no, but then you sat and reflected on it and ended up being one of the best parts of the book, you feel.
Well, actually, that was up there. That was in a writer's group. So
Yeah.
the guy was, in fact, he hadn't even written anything himself yet. And he had suggested moving this line from here to there. And I'm walking around saying, you know, guy's an idiot, doesn't know what he's talking about. I moved that line. And again, it is the best line in the entire book. I love it. And I learned from that to listen to people and listen to their suggestions. You know, I don't know everything. I like to think that I do, but the reality is I don't.
I find, Steve, as I get older, I have more questions than I have answers. You know,
absolutely, absolutely. I've often asked myself if I could travel through time, would I do it? Scares the hell out of me, just the thought of it, because you don't know what would happen.
That's right, you don't. And I get the question every once in a while, if you can go back and change something, what would you tell yourself? And the truth is, I wouldn't change a thing. Things are good. My children are healthy. Everything is going well right now. Why change anything?
I've often thought about, you know, I look upon my life, you know, I'm 73 years old. I've been around for a very long time. And I've often thought, what if I had done this instead of that? What if I made this turn instead of that turn? Well, maybe I would be more wealthy. Maybe I would be more successful, but I would never have met my wife. I would never have had my daughter. I would never have met some of the friends that I have that are valuable to me. Perhaps I would never have written a book. Who knows?
You mentioned you're 73. The first book you wrote when you were 65.
I tell people, you're never too old to start a new enterprise. But if you're not 65, don't wait. You know, do it when you're ready. You know, you do it when it comes up. You know, I've written other things that just weren't publishing ready. And it's also easier to get things published now than it was, you know, 30 years ago. The first time I tried to get something published.
Yeah, there's lots of self-publishing. Now, you're a bit of a tech geek like myself. Did you ever put pen to paper when writing, or is it always on the keyboard?
Oh, always on the keyboard. I mean, back before computers, I did a lot of, you know, writing by hand, and then I had a typewriter. But it's just a lot easier to do it on the keyboard. In fact, I'll tell you a secret. A lot of the Chronocar was actually written on a Palm Pilot.
Wow.
You know, while I'm riding the bus going to work.
Wow. Yeah, I could definitely. Did you ever get the blank page syndrome, Steve?
Well,
Block.
yes and no. When I get writer's block, I just stop and walk away from it. In fact, something I discovered, it's been a while, the last time I had a major block like that, it was years ago, I sat down and just started writing fan fiction. Because you're familiar with fan fiction. It's where you write your stories based on Star Trek or whatever, because you don't have to develop characters, and you just write the story that you imagine. And I love doing the crossovers. You know, where if you're familiar with the Highlander series,
of course.
Okay, where he lives forever, right?
Yeah.
So why would he not show up in the Star Trek universe? And it's a way to keep writing, keep the juices flowing until the block is gone, until you come up with whatever it is you need to get to make the story go forward. And once the block frees, it's like a waterfall. I'm up all night writing.
What's amazing to me, Steve, is that you were doing this research for this book for 3 years, 2 to 3 years, doing science and everything, but you didn't block it out. You didn't storyboard it. You just had an idea of or I guess you kind of had the ending.
Yeah, I had well, I mean, and I had the basic idea in mind, but
I
I
see.
was part of it. I'm always afraid that if I take and put something down and storyboard it, as you say, my mind will get locked into that idea, and I'm
Ah.
not open to other things. By just having it sort of floating in my mind, I'm walking down the street, I see something, and oh my God, that would work. I
Hmm.
used to do radio drama back in the 1970s, and I had written this great little detective story and could not figure out how to end the thing. And it
Mm.
just fell into my head one day while riding the bus, just bang out of the blue. Perfect ending. It just happens that way.
Hmm.
It's called having fun with it because,
Yeah.
I didn't put any deadlines on myself. I've only written 4 books where a lot of writers I know have written 30. Well, this is all
Mm.
I just want to write what I want to write and
Mm.
have it come out the way I wanted to come out. And I've been pretty happy with everything I've done so far.
And you have mentioned, I've heard you mention that, a lot of the stories relate, you kind of put yourself into it.
Mhm,
And the characters, there's, you're an African American man. Does that
mhm.
influence at all the writing, your audience, the style?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you write what you know. If
Mm,
you had written the Chronic Car, it would have been from your point of view.
that's right.
I tell people I don't like it when people try to call my work black science fiction.
Mm,
It's science fiction that happens to black people. The Chronic Car is science fiction first and foremost. It's about a time machine. It just happens that it's black characters that discovers it. Had I been Asian, maybe it would have been an Asian character.
mm, mm, mm.
You write from what you know, but again, I'm most proud of it as a science fiction novel. And sometimes I get lost in the historical parts of it, but it is science fiction first and foremost.
You mentioned your mother would bring home books, and at age 12, the iRobot, Isaac Asimov, really, it kind of changed and shifted your life.
That is what started the whole thing. And I fell in love with science fiction. And by high school, when Star Trek came out, I went completely bonkers over that stuff. And I would write little comic books and stories and things of my own that no one's ever seen. I would love to find some of that stuff somewhere. And it was my dream to eventually write, quote unquote, the great science fiction novel. It just took me a few years to get there.
Mm. Is there any kind of science fiction you don't like?
Um, I don't know if it's real good science fiction. I don't like. I guess when you talk about not liking it, it turns out things that aren't really science fiction.
Mm.
Where you really get into intergalactic societies and all of these strange things. The only movie I've ever fallen asleep on was a Star Wars movie.
Oh boy.
It was the one about the clones. I'm not knocking Star Wars, but there was just
Sure.
so much talking heads and whatever. I fell asleep till the first explosion. Whereas good, pure science fiction, if it's done right, I love it. My favorite film of all time is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Uh,
Most other people fall asleep on it. I've watched it a million times. I absolutely love that film. It is the purest science fiction I've ever seen and accurate.
mm. I heard you say that you don't like, or you don't follow any of the other Star Wars franchise other than the original series.
Yeah, well, the first 2 or 3, they were great. They were groundbreaking. They were exciting. I got into all the action. And then when they decided to expand it, they expounded on the story. It got to be more like fantasy, and I just lost interest. I enjoyed the explosions. I enjoyed the good versus evil. Now they get into all of the relationships and this person doing it's just not interesting to me. Not to knock it. I mean, there are people who love it, and I'm sure the Star Wars franchise will not suffer if I never see another Star Wars film. But I'm also a bit of a well, I'm kind of a curmudgeon, and uh,
Come on.
and sometimes things when something is wildly popular, I tend to not be as
Mm,
interested, you know. And people just love Star Wars, and which is great. I love Star Trek, but not all of it, because a
mm.
lot of the modern Star Trek is getting to be more like Star Wars. So, I one of the arguments I get into when you talk about the original Star Trek movies, my absolute favorite and the one with the most science fiction is the very first Star Trek film,
Really, the motion picture.
the one with
Really?
Beecher.
Yes, with
It's
V'ger.
pure science fiction.
Decker. Yeah.
And also, we're not lost in the fact that the special effects are done by the same guys who did Space Odyssey.
Mm.
But again, that's pure science fiction. Wrath of Khan, great story, but it's about a guy who is trying to get revenge on someone who did him wrong.
Right.
Again, you can tell that story in a Western setting. There's a lot of science fiction in the movie, but it's not the point of the movie. Again,
Hmm.
not that I didn't enjoy it. I love Captain Kirk and I love Khan, but it's not science fiction.
And the fourth one, of course, there's always a big debate. The whales and Earth
And
coming
seeing it,
back.
and I
Yeah.
consider that to be science fiction in that it's dealing with the reality of a species going extinct. Could it possibly be that whales that we know are very intelligent could have come from somewhere else? The only thing I have trouble with is that the time travel part gets kind of crazy.
Yeah, when they wrap
Yeah,
around, right?
and
Yeah.
I also hate the fact that they did the whole thing on a Klingon battle cruise. I would have loved to have seen the Enterprise more, but that's another story. As you can tell from the back here, I'm a major fan of the Enterprise itself.
Yes, you are. Yes. So the next generation, the 1701C, you weren't a fan?
No, actually, I enjoyed Next Generation
The
because again, a
D.
lot of that was very good science fiction.
Yeah.
Some episodes were fantastic science fiction. Some of it not so much, but I got so much into the characters that
Mm.
even when it wasn't strictly sci-fi, I would still enjoy it. My
Mm.
favorite episodes do involve encountering strange entities in space and strange effects and things like that. Have you ever seen any of the new series, the Strange New Worlds?
I enjoy them. 2 seasons, very much so.
And it's very interesting because one of the last episodes was a musical,
Yes,
which I thought I was going to hate. But the premise was so well done that I
it
thought it was
was.
excellent, and it actually put forth the story and opened up the possibilities for future things. There was a science, quote unquote, reason for the thing happening. It was actually quite well done.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, because I thought the Strange New Worlds was very episodic, very similar
Yes.
to the original series. There was a couple of episodes that kind of strung together, but it was,
Hmm.
what they did with Spock. What they,
Hmm.
I enjoyed it, and just the new elements of these characters, and it looks great. What they could do with effects,
Oh
my
yeah.
goodness.
And it makes more sense. I know that there in Strange New Worlds, there is a little thing going on with Spock and Nurse Chapel. That makes
Yes,
sense.
yes,
Spock and Uhura does not.
that
There,
doesn't
wa-
at
there was
all. Yeah.
there was never any connection there. I'm watching an old episode of Star Trek last night, and there was a little bit of friction between Spock and Christine Chapel. It makes perfect sense.
Yes, yes. And of course, we know that uh, Uhura and Captain Kirk, of course, the first kiss on television, right? African American woman
In the United States,
in the United
the,
States, right?
the
Yeah.
Brits had done it long before that.
Of course, they
And
have.
depending upon what you call interracial, I mean, Kirk was lip locking with an Asian woman, like in the previous episode,
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it certainly was.
and of course they had to come up with a way for it to happen where it wasn't on purpose. They never
Mm,
they couldn't air that episode in the South when it came out.
really?
Yeah, they refused to run that episode in the South.
It's amazing to me that only lasted 3 seasons, right? It's only 78 episodes, something like that. And it was crazy.
Well, I think it's because the industry wasn't ready for real science fiction.
Mm,
And it's
mm,
the fans that brought it back, the people who really loved it. I kind of worry about that even with my novel. I've written a screenplay that I've been
yeah.
entering in the contests and things like that. It's gotten a little bit of traction, but are they prepared to deal with some real science fiction? We'll see.
Mm. So, what is your opinion of the current state of science fiction in movies and in books? So, do we have a lot of good selections to choose from?
Yeah, there are some out there, but again, people are more interested in special effects. They're more
Mm,
interested in the wild and crazy. Like a lot of time travel deals with multiple universes and multiple realities. In the
yes.
Chronocar, there is one timeline, and that's what you deal with, and it's not confusing. But again, there are rules and there are consequences in traveling through time, which is something that very few, if any, other time travel stories ever deal with. If you're driving to work in your car, there's a consequence. You're putting a little pollution in the air. You're wearing down the tires. There's a consequence for whatever you're doing. if you're traveling through time, there's got to be a consequence. And in the Chronocar,
Hmm.
time travel damages time and space just a little bit. That's actually an idea that I stole from Space 1999.
Oh
There was a
yeah.
there was a great episode where they were waiting for these ships to come back that we had sent out, years earlier. It was called the Queller Drive, and the ships were being followed by these aliens, ready to do battle because the exhaust fumes or whatever it was from the drive had destroyed their planet.
Oh.
And I thought that was great science in that we never think of the consequences of what we do. We're developing electric cars. It's fantastic. Where's electricity going to come from? And no one's really quite answered that question, I don't think.
Yeah, you mentioned movies. We hear terms like universe now, right? The Marvel universe, and like all these
Hmm.
different timelines and canon. If it's going back to canon, and these are all relatively newer terms, and that just kind of seems to distort. I don't know, in my opinion, where a
Hmm.
lot of the story goes. They can kind of get away with a lot of stuff if they don't have to kind of fall back on what they had set up previously.
Well, I think they depend on the fact that the younger generation don't know where all of these things came from.
Mm,
My favorite superhero is still Superman,
that's right. You said that.
but what they've done to him turns me off completely. I mean, he's almost a bad guy now,
It's
and I
dark.
can't deal with that. The original Superman film with Christopher Reeves, he was a Boy Scout. That's what Superman was all
Yeah.
about. He couldn't understand why people were evil. He just wanted to help everybody. Now he's dark. He's almost as bad as Batman, who's going
Right.
completely off the rails. So, I've almost lost interest in the new superhero films. They've made them
Mm,
so dark. And I think that the young people, they've never seen the other and they don't know what they're missing. There used to be a message of good always wins over evil. I want to
right.
walk out of a theater with kind of a good feeling. Superman has beat the bad guys and the world is safe. Not, okay, Superman may have killed the wrong person. He's destroyed the planet. Now what are we going to do?
Mm.
That's not entertainment to me. The last Batman film, the one that was 3 hours long, we walked out of the middle of it. It just
Did you
didn't.
really?
It just didn't work. That's one of the things my wife and I sort of have in common. We
Mm.
like to harken back to the old fashioned what it started out as.
Big,
I was at work talking about. I overheard some young people talking about how great the Mission Impossible films were with Tom Cruise,
yeah.
and I commented how I don't know. I think the TV series was actually better. And the guy goes, "There was a TV series?
Right.
They have no idea." You know,
Yeah. Leonard Nimoy was in a few episodes of the Mission Impossible television
Yeah, he
series.
was. He was. And
Yeah.
that was about the time when I started losing interest, not because of him, but because I had gotten so used to the original characters.
Mm.
Another reason why it took a while for me to get back into Star Trek because, William Shatner is Captain Kirk. Nichelle Nichols is Lieutenant Uhura. Strange New Worlds, they did it in such a way that they're reintroducing them, and that sort of works.
Yes.
In the film, they tried to make caricatures of them, and that just
Mm.
didn't come
Mm.
together.
I'm real happy to hear you like Strange New Worlds because I really enjoy it. I don't know how many people give it. They're having another season, so that means people
Yes,
like
which
it.
is good. Yeah.
Yeah, which is really good. But I think I might have actually watched the first season twice. I just really
Oh yeah.
the whole Captain Pike. We know what
Yes.
happens with him in the menagerie, of course, but to see him
Exactly.
kind of go back and I think they did a really good job. You mentioned your wife. So has the Klingon wedding has that occurred yet?
No, that was going to happen just before the pandemic.
Ah,
Uh, we were actually going to do that on a cruise that got canceled because of the pandemic. So we sort of put that on hold, but it's not a dead issue. We may still pull that off. I've got to get the story is that I was going to dress in a captain's I'm sorry, an admiral's dress uniform, and she was going to have a custom made leather and lace Klingon wedding dress. And we've got to do that because when I'm in that uniform, that will be the only time I outrank her.
that's right. You outrank her the only time. Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah, yeah.
So it's
Does
still a
she,
dream. We just got to, pick it
sure.
back up.
Will any of the ceremony be actually spoken in Klingon?
No, it would all be in English. We'll
In
keep it
English.
straightforward. We the pastor, the woman who may do it, is enough of a Trekkie that it would work.
I
I had
see.
this dream of being asked, Steve, do you take this woman, or whatever? And then I would hesitate, and then Donna would turn and say, resistance is futile. Then
Now
I
that
would
was
turn to the,
Borg.
then I would turn to the audience and go, well, make it so. Anyway,
Yeah, I see.
you want to have a little fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now you wrote the Chronic Car, your second
Mm,
book, Edge of Perception, your third, The Apocalypse, and then back another Time Waits for No One, another Chronic Car. Uh,
exactly.
but the Chronic Car actually shows up in all your novels.
Exactly, in different ways. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. One of the things that I wanted to do, and I think I succeeded, is the book is a series. You could read them in order and get one sense of it. You could read them out of order. I have had people who've read Time Waits for No One and have never seen the Chronic Car, but they were not confused and they enjoyed it. If you only like paranormal stories, you could read Edge of Perception and enjoy that. So each one stands alone, but they all build on each other if you read them all. And incidentally, Apocalypse has an Easter egg that no one's ever found.
Ah.
I'm dying for somebody to read it and tell me if they can find the Easter egg.
That's so fun.
Oh yeah.
And you're turning them all into possibly to get it determined the movies. Like if they come to you, I mean, how much control do you want there, Steve? That's going to be a real tough. You're gonna have to wrestle.
Well, when I first wrote the Chronic Car, I thought I would like to have complete control. I want it to be exactly the way I wrote it.
Right, right.
At this point, if they make it a comedy, I'll take it if they pay me enough.
Yeah. And who would
You know,
play the main character if you chose?
let's see. I don't know who would play the character of Tony Carpenter. I mean, I once
Yeah.
thought about a young Denzel Washington would be great, but he's
Yes.
too old now. In fact, he could
Right.
probably be Dr. Johnson. So
Ah.
I'm not sure who could play who anymore. I sort of lost track of who all of the young actors are now.
Michael Jordan, maybe.
Yeah,
There's
exactly. Yeah,
plenty.
but
There's plenty.
but the thing is, it wouldn't be my choice anyway. So
Right,
you
right,
know,
right, right.
maybe
Yeah,
a bunch of unknowns. I mean, they pulled a hell of a job off with Christopher Reeves as Superman.
they sure did. They sure
So we'll
did.
see what
Yeah.
happens.
Boy, that would be an exciting, exciting time. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm actually working on a fifth novel now, which is sort of a disaster movie. It has to do with the Earth's magnetic field going crazy and things happening with that. So I'm in development with that, and I'm doing some other things. I'd like to invite people to visit my website, stevebellinger.com. I've got, you can hear my old radio dramas. I'm not sure if I mentioned that back in the 70s, I did a modern version of War of the Worlds based on
I
the
heard you
old
say it.
H.G.
Pretty
Wells thing.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that and it's still my magnum opus, and I've been told it's better than the original. And I've done a new series called Once Told, where people are reading my short stories, and uh, and it's amazing. We were talking the other day about the power of the internet. One of the people who reads one of my stories is a young woman, a black woman from London, whom I have never met, and she reads one of my stories. The next episode is going to be read by the British woman that I've never met, and the story is written by a black woman from Japan whom I've never met,
Wow.
and is going to be part of this series. It is totally amazing. I have friends that I've made internationally through this book on the internet, and I'm dying to meet them all. It's
That's
amazing.
wonderful. Could you ever write nonfiction?
Yeah, I mean, I started off. I mean, heck, I wrote Sunday school lessons. I mean, if you're a
Mm,
decent writer, you can write almost anything. I used to write
mm,
newspaper
mm.
articles and all sorts of things, but nonfiction is not as much fun. Well,
Uh,
and I do. I have a daytime job. I work in tech support, and I'm the guy who writes the technical articles for the
huh.
knowledge base. And I do training videos, which people seem to enjoy. So yeah, I guess I could.
What's your opinion on AI and its influence on authorship?
Okay. It's you should read Apocalypse. Uh, it
Mm,
scares me because one of the reasons that these guys are on strike is that, and I don't know if this is urban legend or not, but one of the things that the studios are thinking of doing is having AI write scripts and then having humans just sort of clean them up. And there was also talk of taking the scripts from all of the great blockbusters in the past feeding them into an AI and having it using those elements to write another blockbuster. And what you will end up with is, Batman fighting the Little Mermaid in space. I mean, and
Mm.
and as dumb as that stuff might be, the audience will come to accept it,
Probably
and there'll
would.
be
Probably
no
would.
more originality. That's
Mm.
what I'm worried about. At one of the writers groups I was in, this young man had written 800 pages of what he thought was going to be the next Star Wars, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to write the first Star Wars. I want to write the first, you know, of a series or of an idea, if you follow my drift.
Mm.
And I'm always interested in something that is new and interesting. I enjoy sequels, but I'd like to see the original and something that is totally different. And I think the whole idea behind AI is that it is using what is already out there. A machine cannot have an original idea. So you're going to have mashups. You're going to have
Mm.
a repetition. And it's going to be boring, I think. But because it's easy and it's cheap, it will happen. And I think what will happen is these dumb films will be made. They'll make a lot of money in the beginning because people are curious. Then they'll get bored and then we'll come back to humans writing the stories. I
Mm.
mean, I use an AI based program to do like editing to catch
Right.
basic mistakes, but I almost never use the words or the lines that it recommends. It doesn't make any sense. They're always out of context because it doesn't know what's happening in chapter three.
Right. 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 Like Grammarly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, it's called Pro Writer or something, but it's similar
Yeah.
to Grammarly. And
Yeah.
again, it's great for catching the misspellings and the very basic
Mm.
mistakes.
Mm.
And once in a while, it'll suggest a sentence that sounds better than mine every now and then, but usually it's so out of context that it makes no sense.
So
And
sense.
and
Yeah.
and there is, my wife is also a writer. She writes business books, and she did an article for an anthology, and she had AI go through that, and I read it, and it was all technically perfect, but it had no soul. It had no feeling. It was not
Mm.
her. It's not
Mm.
the way that she speaks, and that's why people hire her because of who she is, not just what
Right.
she knows.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to lose with AI, but I think it will eventually come back, but we're going to pay a big price
Mm.
before it does.
Yeah, we're really going to see what happens, especially now.
And it's happening very quickly. I mean, one of my friends
Mm.
at work was making jokes about it, and he was asking if I was concerned about it. And I said, yeah, I may be out of a job soon. And he goes, it won't take that long. And I said, yeah, like 6 months. Because
Mm.
already this stuff is happening so quickly. Technology evolves so quickly. And now you're hearing that this AI has gotten confused and this AI doesn't know what it's doing. The whole point of Apocalypse, which was written like almost 5 years ago, is an AI system that takes things too far.
Mm.
When we talk about efficiency, we know when to break the rules or to bend the rules to make things work. A machine, it is black or white or it's nothing.
That's right.
The other thing, I've worked in technology long enough to know that when a computer malfunctions, it might do any damn thing.
Mm.
We used to have you're a little bit technically oriented, and people are aware of the blue screen of death, which was very prevalent a few years ago. It's not as
Sure.
prevalent now as before.
Mm.
And they discovered that one of the reasons was that the chips were getting so small that something as small as a cosmic ray particle was causing a short that would cause the blue screen of death.
Wow.
Now, when a computer malfunctions, it could do anything. I've had people working on their computers and they're working on an email. Something goes wrong, and the thing sends the email before he's finished. He never
Mm.
he never clicks the button. Well, a computer, it's a malfunction,
Right.
you know. But when a computer malfunctions, anything is possible. A human, even if you're confused, you might hesitate. Wait a minute, should I push this button or not? A computer, oh yeah, push the button. It's gone. What's next? And now you've got a client who's gotten an email that maybe they shouldn't have received. You know,
Mm.
one
Right.
of the biggest things that I've often heard is, how can I get back an email that I sent yesterday? Well, it ain't gonna
Mm.
happen. It's already gone. You know. So we live
Yeah.
in a world where we're gonna have a lot of great Jetsons type technology, and the world is going to be great, but there's going to be a price to pay.
Yeah, there's a price. Yeah.
We're already paying the price of no privacy as it is. I've got a friend who refuses to get on Facebook because he doesn't want to put his information out there, and I'm telling him it's already out there.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. Back in the 90s, I had a friend like that who never wanted to use the machine to pay for his gasoline by the pump. He didn't want it to, but he goes into the store, they swipe it, and the modem goes off. I mean, it is already out there. People you trust, like the credit bureaus, they get hacked. What the hell are you going to do?
It's
but
tough.
On a lighter note,
I was going to say, but everybody's healthy. So Steve, I started my tech business back in the 90s, and I was working way too hard, and I wasn't paying attention to myself, and eating a lot of pizza and drinking soda, and I got myself up to 340 pounds, and the doctor said to me, look, if you don't lose this weight, my daughter was just born, you're not going to see her graduate. So I took the next 7 months to lose about 130 pounds. And people always ask me, how'd you do it? Like, what's your secret? What would you? And Steve, I say one word: discipline. That's how I lost the weight. Just discipline. I'm not going to tell you something you don't know. Just discipline. And it's not just taking it off. It's not a finish line. You got to continue to you got to change your lifestyle. How does discipline play a role in your life, Steve Bellinger?
Well, I think I'm fortunate in that I was born in the 50s and I'm a child of the 60s, in that I still like to go out and ride my bicycle. I still like to go out and walk. I know the security guy who is always warning people when you're going down the street, don't have your headphones on. Make sure you're not looking at your phone. I don't do that anyway. I'm busy observing the world, and especially if I'm in a high crime area, I want to know where everybody is. So I never got into the trap. My best friend is a big gamer. Again, nothing wrong with that. But I can't sit at a screen and play a game for hours. I'm sitting here now talking to you, and I'm looking at the sunshine. I'm looking at the warm weather. How long is that going to be out there? As soon as we're done, I'm going to be out on the beach.
Good for you.
And I think that's just it's because of the fact that I'm a baby boomer, and I wasn't born with a device in my hands. A very funny story. My wife and I went to Disney World once. We're sitting in a restaurant, and its family comes, sitting in the next table, and we're noticing how quiet they are. I mean, you're at Disney World, for gosh sakes. Every person in the family, from the father and mother to the infant in the little baby seat, had a device.
Wow.
And everybody's looking at their devices. They only look up to order their food. And I'm thinking, how are you enjoying this? Half the fun is discussing what you've done and talking about how much fun it was. But I fear that's the world we're coming into, that the only excitement we're going to find is on a TV or a movie screen.
So fascinating. You relate discipline just to the ability of going and living and not being connected to technology or the devices, I should say, and not being distracted, just kind of staying focused and smelling the roses.
Yeah, again, we talked about, when I get writer's block and why I don't worry about not having written 5,000 words tonight.
Right.
Because while I'm walking around outside, this next novel that I'm working on, I was standing on a roof deck of the building that I lived in at the time, and I saw these strange rays of light in the sky that was coming from the wrong direction.
Whoa.
And that drove me nuts until I looked it up, and it's called anti-crepuscular rays. It has to do with the sun being behind you and whatever. There was an explanation for it, but it was so bizarre that it was the thing that suggested this next story. If I'm sitting in a house all the time, I'm not going to see the things that are my inspirations. I didn't get the idea of apocalypse by sitting in a house watching television. It was watching people staring at their phones and being hypnotized by them. And that's where the idea came from. And that's why it's so scary, because that's how the system gets into everybody's minds, through their phones, through their video games and everything else. Now, the main character is a retired elderly computer geek who has all these years of knowledge and who has the discipline to, no, I don't need a phone all the time. And he's the one who sees it coming and has to solve the problem. So, in other words, I'm the hero again.
Yes. Nothing wrong with that. What
Yeah.
motivates you, Steve?
What motivates me? Living another day, and trying to
Hmm.
get the most out of life. And I like to inspire other people. Nothing makes me happier when someone reads one of my books and gets it and really enjoys it.
Mm.
My books, they're not self-published. They're published by an independent publisher. I'd gladly give them all away, you know.
Mm.
But again, the publisher needs to make their money. I need to make a little money. But I just when someone comes up to me and says that they enjoy, even if they didn't like it, the fact that they read it and got enough out of it to say that I didn't get this part or that much, I'm still
Mm.
affecting them. My motivation is to try to inspire people, entertain people, get them to think, and to show them that there's more to the world than Star Wars, I guess.
Hmm. And how do you measure success?
Um, Completion. The book is done. It's beautiful. I mean, it's got this fantastic cover. It looks fantastic, and I
It
love it.
does look
That's my
fantastic.
success. The first edition had a different cover that was done by an award-winning artist. When I held that first book in my hand, I was in tears. That was my success. People are always asking me, what are book sales like? I don't know. People are buying it, but the book is great and it's out there.
Mm. Mm.
Okay. Did you read it? Yes. Did you like it? Yes. Then I'm successful. Then it worked. I'd love to sell 1 million copies. We're working on that. But right now, I'm happy that I have a quality product out there and people are enjoying it. I had to tell my friends sometimes I invite them to the book fairs and things that I do, and they often apologize. Oh, Steve, I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Well, again, it's not my friends so much as the people that I don't know that I want to reach with this. My friends, they're going to read it, they're going to love it. But when
Mm.
someone that I've never met picks this book up and says, this is great, that's it. I've succeeded.
Mm. What an absolute pleasure to speak with you today, Steve. I was so excited when you accepted this. I'm a big fan. I can't wait to see what you do next. Anybody who's listening, how can we get in touch with you?
The best way is going to my website, stevebellinger.com. That's the missus there.
Hi.
But no, stevebellinger.com. All of my books are available on Amazon as paperback, ebook, and as audiobooks. They're also available on Smashwords as an ebook. And if you go to my website, you can also get an autograph copy.
Very
And
cool.
there are
Did
a
you do
lot
the
there.
audio?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Uh,
Well, because the publisher controls all of that, which is fine.
right.
Which and
Right.
they got some great people to do it. The next book, I may do my own audiobook. We'll see. But
Mm.
one of the reasons why I got a publisher is that I want to write. I don't want to market. I don't want to do this. I don't want to put it
Mm.
together.
Mm.
I want to
Mm.
do the writing.
I
So
agree.
we'll see what happens.
And it's Steve, obviously Steve Bellinger, Bellinger. We're going to make sure we put it in the show notes. Steve, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If I'm ever in the Illinois area, perhaps we can get a cup of coffee.
Absolutely. It was fun talking to you, Joey. I've had a great time.
I really did as well. You be well.
Thank you, sir. You take care.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.